We are starting to get some pretty sweet Venice vibes from the city now, and in this episode you're going to see it more than double in size. The first thing I'm going to do is place down literally thousands of buildings. The first minute and a half of this episode took about 15 or 16 hours to build. So welcome guys to episode 57 of Europe in Detail. My favourite part of this has got to be how the canals now with all the buildings in really look like roads. You can see there's those clearly visible waterways that just cut through the buildings and create the blocks that we see. And now that all those buildings are in, I have an even larger task, and that's to go through and get everything functioning properly, get the paths in the right spot and detail where necessary. I found this really neat little wee pier that doubles as a ferry stop, and you can see me trying to install and get that running here, but unfortunately this stuffed my entire save up, and it was a few hours before I figured out that it was this ferry stop, and that was a few anxious hours indeed because I literally thought I had lost the save, but I reverted back to an old save and thankfully that saved it and we carry on. What it does mean though is I'm going to struggle to find the right pier. I need a really narrow one to make this work, or ideally an invisible one that I could create myself, but after spending a good lot of time on the workshop having a look, I just couldn't find anything appropriate. This one was the only one I found and I'm way too scared to try use it again. So for now I'm going to leave those waterborne services to the side and we're going to carry on. Now there's a lot of footbridges that I need to create here in Venice, and some of them are the same. They follow a particular type of architecture and they are a big part of the aesthetics overall. I want to be as particular as possible with these, and I didn't expect to find anything on the workshop, so I was fully prepared to make these bridges myself. The combination of handy shapes from the workshop and the mod procedural objects means that I can make pretty much a custom bridge. I do however try out a few different props before I settle on one that I'm going to use, and then it's about scaling it right and making sure I can run the pedestrian path over it and have the pedestrians run as close to the stairs as possible to make it look realistic. This is about one of 4 bridges you're going to see me build in this episode, and they sort of build up in varying difficulty right until the final one that I do. That final one is going over the Grand Canal, so there is a lot of detail in it. There is a handful of bridges around Venice that are the same, so what I'm hoping I can do is just copy and paste these later on where I can, and you'll see why, because the work that I put in with procedural objects to make these takes a long time. If there's any way that I can save time, I will absolutely explore that option. I believe the name of this canal in real life that we're working over is the Cannaregio. I could be wrong, but it's not quite as large as the Grand Canal, but it is more prominent than your average canal in Venice. And there's a couple of really nice footbridges that go over this, and this one here that we're working on is sort of a tiered style one. And this one was quite the pain to do. I got almost right through building it and then found a different prop that actually looked better and then decided to pretty much start again. So I use a combination of different props here to make this bridge. The first one here is I have a bridge arch that's actually from Venice. I can tag the creator in the comments if anybody's interested, but unfortunately these models aren't very accurate. The scale's off and the textures aren't very nice either. But in saying that, there is parts of it that I really do like there's these little wee lion sort of statues or plaques that line the archway, which would be almost impossible for me to build with procedural objects. And because I'm mostly scaling these bridges down and not up, the textures really only get better. So what is it I'm actually trying to build here? Well, there's 3 archways, a large one in the middle and 2 smaller ones on the peripheral. These sort of create the tiered look to the stairs. The bridge is also sort of an orangey red colour, and I'm doing my best to make sure there's enough headroom underneath the archway so that I can get boats and gondolas through. In real life, it's a very tight fit, and it is going to be a tight fit in game as well. So this bridge comes together in much the same method that you've seen the last one come together. However, I need to talk about the pedestrian paths a little bit. Of course, I'm going to run pedestrian paths over these bridges and get them functioning within game. I mean, there's no question. And it used to be really difficult to do this, but with the different paths available now, like this concrete one that I'm using, and more importantly, node controller, we can manipulate these paths and get them very close to prop stairways. I've had a few people ask why I don't use invisible paths, and I've explained it in the past, but I'll explain it again. I prefer these concrete ones because I can see exactly what I'm doing with them, and they only need to be under the concrete half an inch and you don't see them. Some paths can do really crazy things after you turn them invisible, and I'm just going to have too many paths down to have to deal with any issues. So once the stairs go in, we're almost complete and ready for some people to start walking over it. I just want to add some prop concrete in underneath the archways and make it look like the footing goes all the way down to the bottom of the canal. I wish I could make this water look more murky because you shouldn't see the bottom, but I just can't. So with that, the bridge is done and we're going to move on to the next one. But just quickly, while I'm talking about the canals, you're going to see that I've changed the colour of the water. It's a much more greeny, murky colour now than the blue that it was. Thank you to those of you who put in the comments that the water colour wasn't quite right, because you were absolutely correct. But like I mentioned, I wish I could make it more murky. If there's anybody out there that knows potentially how I could do that, I'm all ears. Please leave a comment for me. Now I want to finish off the canal here with a little bit more detail, and we see lots of awnings, shop fronts, there's more tables and restaurants that line the canals. There's also some small kiosk areas by the looks, and I use Ronix 69's puddle decals from the workshop here along the edge of the canal. I think this is a really nice touch. There's also a lot of boats that are moored up along here, so they go in as well, and I think this looks really cool with all the people moving along. There's some smaller canals that have been made in these blocks that I'd like to spend a bit of time putting some detail around as well. It might not be quite as much as we'd see along the more prominent canals, but I still want to make all of these canals look pretty realistic. And of course, I'm still trying to follow that real life model as close as I possibly can. These little wee narrow canals have a real mix of buildings that go right into them and little wee keyed areas where people can walk. There's also a lot of boats parked up on these, so I want to make them as narrow as I can, but obviously leave enough room for that to happen. Some areas also have like old brick and stone retaining walls that run into the canal, and I also noticed that there was a couple of buildings that I missed out initially at the beginning. Once I'd got this main shape of the area right, I can sort of move on to the smaller props like planters and bridges and things like that. And looking on Google Earth, this is a really cool and cozy little area. There's a couple of cute wooden bridges that go over the canal here. There's also some nice shade. There's a lot of trees around. and it just generally looks a little bit more relaxing than those really high traffic areas. I've planted some of the citizens' homes way over here as well, so we've already got lots of people walking around, and that's important because when we move on to making these bridges, I want to get them as accurate as possible and have the people walking right over them perfectly. It's also much easier to scale the bridge properly if we've got people walking over it. There's nothing worse than spending ages making a bridge and then realizing your handrail was 8 feet off the deck. Yes, I have been there. In fact, you are going to see that right now. I've got a Venice style path that I tried to upgrade this to, but it just didn't work. The citizens were clipping well past their knees and the handrail, like I said, was just 100 feet in the air. Rather than using props to do this, I actually just end up upgrading it to the elevated vanilla gravel pathway, which is a really cool old weathered wood look, and in combination with node controller I can make this really narrow and it actually looks really cool, I think. So back over here by the train station, on the edge of the Grand Canal, we're going to start adding heaps of detail. This is the area where I just really don't want to hold back. This is also a really popular spot in Venice, and there's a lot going on here. There's foot traffic going in all directions. There's lots of shops. There's looks like a ferry service nearby. And with 90% of our citizens coming in via the train, this area is only going to get busier and busier. A fun fact, this is actually where the opening shot from this episode was recorded. There is a really nice stone footbridge that goes over the Grand Canal right here, and I want to put it in. The first thing I need to do in order to be able to put that bridge in is establish the other side of the Grand Canal. I need to know how big to make the bridge, right? So I use the same method to establish a shoreline over the other side that I have for 90% of Venice so far, which is just Epic Lurker's Dutch key and then a surface network on top. I've also tried to carefully create some steps down into the Grand Canal on this side, and then finally I'll make sure it's all sitting at the right height, which is the same as the other side. Now I can move on to the bridge. Ryan Cat has a whole bunch of really cool stone bridges on the Steam Workshop, and this one here was almost perfect. I did however need to modify it somewhat with procedural objects, like stretching it to the right size, changing the colour to a softer, more sandy type, and just moving a few sticky outy bits on the bridge that don't need to be there. I also get that concrete pedestrian path in place nice and early. I was really hoping I would have some sort of a stone prop asset that I could use for the handrail, but I really didn't. I had some that were close but couldn't be manipulated properly with procedural objects, so I've decided to use a stone bollard and pretty much make my own. One prominent feature of this stone handrail is it's white, so the first thing I want to do is add a white decal to the bollard and then copy it over and over again, being sure to try and get both sides to match as closely as possible and also keeping it symmetrical from side to side. Finishing this is easy. I just use a stone prop and manipulate it into a handrail top and use the same method to apply a white decal to it. This is resting just on top of our bollards. And looking at this now, I'm so pleased I decided to make this out of props because this looks really good. The detail's high and this is going to be in a really visual area. Before I can move the bridge back over into position, I have to put the stairs in. I use the same stone stairs that I have, ooh, that was a tongue twister, on all the other bridges. And you may have noticed that it was already stairs, but they were scaled wrong because I had to change the scale of the bridge initially. And these stone ones just have a really nice texture to them. So the very last thing I'll do before I move it back into position is put surfaces right on the very top. The front of the train station here definitely needs some love. I haven't made it as accurate as I could have, and we're going to fix that right now. In real life, there's stairs here that elevate up about 4 feet. There's some really nice gardens around here, and there's some small buildings off to the side that I had missed. I topped the area off with a little statue that's here in real life, and also a couple of restaurants nearby. In the next episode, we are going to dive deep into the waterborne services and get all of these canals working. I had a very cool asset made from Sven Berlin earlier in the series that we're finally going to get to use properly. I hope you guys are enjoying following along with the series. I'm absolutely in love with making it. Leaving me a thumbs up does me wonders with the algorithm, so if you've enjoyed my content, hit that thumbs up for me, or do me one better and subscribe if you're not already. Thanks a lot for stopping in, guys, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. See you later.